All right, so law of cosines. Can somebody remind me how we know that a problem is law of sines? So what information did we look for yesterday? Angle, side, angle was one of the easy problems. Angle, angle, side was one of the easy problems. And then angle, side, side was the ambiguous case. Those were the frustrating problems, right? So law of cosines you use if you see that the triangle has side, angle, side as the given information, or if you have side, side, side as the given information. So you can look at the triangle first, see what they told you, and then that tells you which law to use. Okay? Yeah?
Side, angle, side,
No, this is saying that it's two sides and the angle's in between them. Angle, side, side is when you have two sides and the angle is not the angle between them. Okay? So this is specifically saying the angle has to be between the two sides. Okay? So the law of cosines looks terrible. There are three of them, but they are essentially the same thing, and you're not going to memorize the formula so much as you're just going to understand how to do it, if that makes sense. Okay? So the first formula for law of cosines is a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos of angle A. Yes, it's a handful. I do agree with that. I see that. All right. The second law of cosines, you're going to see the pattern, is b squared equals a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cos b. Do you guys see the similarities?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the third one is c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cos c. So really, if you've memorized one, you've memorized them all. Okay. So the way that I remember this in my head is I think this letter and this letter match. You guys see that? Okay. And then I just square the other two and I add them together. I don't care which side is which. I just know if I'm using this angle, then the side that goes with the angles on the outside of the equal sign, the other two sides get squared inside. All right, and then I just remember that it's these two sides, it's -2 times those two sides. So for me, I never actually identify what is A, what is B, what is C, and plug it into the formula. I never do that. I always just think, what is the side that I'm looking at, and what are the other two sides? Okay, so I wouldn't be so stressed about memorizing this formula the way that it's written, so much as just being able to pick out the numbers and use them. Does that kind of make sense for starting? Okay, because a lot of people see that and then they are automatically intimidated, and it's really not as bad as it looks. Okay, so first we're going to go ahead and look at a triangle. I'm going to say find the missing side. And we're going to say that side A is 2. Side B is 3, and angle C is 61 degrees. So when I start you off on these problems today, we're going to start off a little bit easy so we can get comfortable with the formula. And then after that, we're going to go into solving the whole triangle, which will make it so we do have to store numbers just like we did yesterday. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and draw a picture of my triangle. I always call this angle A, angle B, angle C is 61 degrees. Side A is 2, side B is 3. So if I look at the information that was given to me when I label it in a triangle, I can see that it's two sides that are next to each other, and the angle is in between those two sides. Okay, so it's side, angle, side. Okay, are we good so far?
Yes.
Okay, so the side that I'm solving for is C. All right, that's the missing side. So I'm not even going to look at my formula. I'm not memorizing it. I'm just going to say that C squared equals, and I'm going to write the other two sides squared. 3 squared plus 2 squared. So it doesn't matter which one's which, it's just I know that they're going to be squared, I know they're going to be added together. Okay? And then I'm going to minus 2, and that's part of the formula. That's not because there's a 2 in the problem, that happens every single time. And then I'm just going to multiply those two numbers together. 3 times 2. Cos of the angle that went with that side. So cos of 61. All right? And that gets plugged straight into my calculator exactly the way it looks. Okay, so I have 3 squared plus 2 squared minus 2 times 3 times 2 times cos 61. I use the times button because I didn't feel like doing all those parentheses. If you wanted to do all the parentheses, that's totally fine. It's up to you. Okay. I will say future problems will be easier if you use the times button. So I'd maybe just use the times button. Okay, and what did we get? Okay, so c squared is approximately 7.182, but that's c squared, that's not c. So what do I have to do to this problem? Square root it. Okay, you have two options, all right? You can say second square root, do you see how I got that on there? Second square root, and then hit second answer, so we're plugging in those decimals perfectly. That's one option. Or, so I got that answer, what I like to do, so here's my decimal, what I like to do is I raise this to the 0.5 power. Why would I raise it to the 0.5 power? Yeah, because it's x to the 1/2. X to the 1/2 is the same thing as square rooting x. So I do that so I don't have to pull the decimals down, because I'm a fancy math teacher and I know that square rooting is the same as raising to the 1/2. Whatever you want to do is fine. Okay, so I did it up here by square rooting the decimal. I did it down here by raising it to the 0.5. Either way, I get the right answer. Okay, so c squared is 7.182. C is 2.679, followed by a 9 rounds up to 80. So 679 round up to 680. Okay, and then that's all they wanted. Solve for the side. Boom, we're done. All right. How are you feeling about using that formula? Okay. All right, we're going to practice that so that we don't move too fast. Okay, so let's try one of these. How do we get started? Find the missing side. So it's side angle side, right? So we are finding side S. So I'm going to start off by saying s squared equals, and how do I do the formula? Yeah, I'm going to do the other two sides squared, right? So I've got 10.6 squared plus 23 squared. And then I put minus 2, and what else do I have to put? Times, these are different letters, right? So times 10.6 times 23, and then cos 52.2. And what you'll find is that your c squared number is often really big. So don't be nervous because it's a square number, so it's okay if it's large. Or not c squared, I guess this time it was s squared. So I got 342.507 for my s squared. And then would you guys rather raise it to the 1/2 power, or do you want to square root? What? Okay. So I can do raise to the 0.5 because I'm feeling lazy and that's easiest to type. And that gives me 18.507 and I'm done. Oh, yards. We got units on this. Okay. Do you feel ready to try some on your own? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So, example 2. For the instructions for this one, you are going to find the largest angle. So they're going to give you 3 sides. A equals 16, B equals C equals 7. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and draw the triangle. Got A, B, C. Angle A goes with side A. Angle B goes with side B. Angle C goes with side C. So how do we know which angle to find? Yeah, it's the angle that corresponds to the biggest side. The biggest side has the biggest angle. So which side would it be? B. Yeah, angle B. So side B goes with angle B, so this is the one we're looking for. Okay? Now, this is something that you have to be very careful of with law of cosines. When you solve for angles, you can only solve for the big angles because you might accidentally stumble upon an ambiguous case. Okay? So the nice thing about this, with law of sines, we have angle side side, it's an ambiguous case, we know it. With law of cosines, as long as we only use the law of cosines for the 2 biggest angles, we will never have to deal with an ambiguous case. Okay? We can avoid it, but we can only use it for the biggest angles. So if I wanted to find the smallest angle, angle C, I would not find that one first. I would have to find angle B and find angle A, and then I would do 180 degrees minus B minus A, and that's how I would find C. Okay? So we're not there yet. I'm just preparing you guys. I'm letting you know. The one trick, the one thing you have to watch out for with law of cosines is you have to look for your big angles. You do not look for your small angles, okay? As long as you keep that in mind, you can use the law of cosines. You don't have to worry about ambiguous case, anything weird, okay? So we're going to go ahead and set this up. We're doing cos B at the very end, and we have to start off with the side that corresponds with that. So I'm going to say 21 squared equals. All right, so this time I'm not solving for that side, I have that side. 21 squared equals, and then I'm going to do the other 2 sides squared added together. So 7 squared plus 16 squared minus 2 times 7 times, and then times cos B. Okay? So we have to solve for B, and we're going to do these problems exactly the same way every single time so that we understand what we're doing, okay? So these numbers right here, they are the coefficient for B. That means that these numbers right here would have to be divided to undo them. We cannot just divide something over first, all right? The first thing we do is we can add or subtract things to the other side. These 2 terms right here are the things that could be added or subtracted over, okay? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take these 2 right here and I'm going to subtract them over to the other side, okay? And I'm going to use my calculator to kind of help me do it. I'm going to do 21 squared minus 7 squared minus 16 squared. So that is me subtracting those to the other side. Okay, 136. So now I'm going to show my work. I have 136 equals, and I got rid of those, so it equals negative 2 times 7 times 16 times cos B. So now I have all those numbers that are in front of cos. I'm going to just divide all of those over at the same time. So I'm going to take this whole thing, and I'm going to divide it by -2, and 7, and 16. I'm going to divide it by all of those at the same time. So 136 divided by -2, and 7, and 16, all at the same time. And you have to be careful about how you plug this into your calculator. So I'm going to say divide by, so it's taking the 136 and it's going to divide by, and then I have to put parentheses. -2 times 7 times 16. And I'm going to type it that way every single time. I am not going to show the multiplication this way using parentheses, because if you do, you have to use a lot of extra parentheses and you'll get confused. So I'm just going to divide by -2 times 7 times 16. And it has to be in parentheses to show that all of that is on the bottom of the fraction. Are we good so far? Okay. So we have this decimal. So I've got -0.607 equals cos b. And how do I get rid of cos? Yeah, cos inverse. So second cos, and then I'm going to do second answer. So I'm pulling those decimals into the cos inverse. So second cos, second answer. And so angle B is 127.383 degrees. Okay? And we're done with that one.
You don't have to solve for the whole triangle.
Nope, we're going to start off simple. Yeah. So eventually we're going to be storing that so that we can solve for other things. But for right now, we're going to leave it as just angle B is right there. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and grab our packets. Yeah.
When we kill a baby animal, we have to multiply this stuff. Okay. You remember when you say we have the second part that we divide?
Mm-hmm.
We multiply that together first.
If you multiplied it together first, you would not kill a baby animal. However, I'm having you write it like this because eventually we're going to have stored numbers for these. And if you multiply them together, then that means you have to store more numbers. It's a little bit easier to just leave them as stored numbers right here. And so I'm making you do it in a certain way where we can do it the exact same way every single time. So yes, multiplying 2 times 7 times 16 would be easy on this problem. But other problems, when we start to have stored numbers, not so good. Yeah. So this way you can at least just memorize, work with that same process every single time. Okay. So for number 5, which angle are we going to find if we're looking for the biggest angle? P. Okay. So what should I write?
29 squared. 13 squared.
And then that would be cos P. Have you guys memorized the formula yet? Yeah. So it looks real terrible, but you can memorize it without even really trying because it just is kind of the same every time. Yeah. Hey, Tucker. All right. So what should we do first? Yeah. So I'm going to take these both and subtract them over. So 231. Sometimes you'll have a positive number when you do that. Sometimes you'll have a negative number when you do that. Both are okay. So I've got 231 equals -2 times 13 times 21 cos P. Okay. And then what do I do? Divide those 3 numbers over. you know why I hound you guys so much. All right, and once we have this decimal, this equals cos p. So if I know that 0.423 is cos p, how do I find just p? Yeah, so I'm going to hit second cos, and then second answer to put those decimals right back in there. And so my angle is 115.029. All right, so what we are going to do is we are going to take a problem off of your homework packet and we are going to write it in your notes so that your notes has like a really good example of a solved problem written down, okay? So the first problem we're going to do is a side angle side problem, okay? So we are going to solve the whole triangle. On the notes, I'm going to write example, solve the triangle. And I'm going to show on my notes that this is a side angle side problem because side angle side problems feel different when you solve them from side problems. They each have their own like little complication to them. So solve the triangle. The information they gave us on this triangle is that side H is 27 centimeters. I'm just looking at number 9. Side P is 22 centimeters. And angle K is 60 degrees. So you're going to write that information down from number 9. And in your packet on number 9, you're just going to write down in notes. So you're doing a problem out of your packet. So you do not have to do it a second time. You're just going to have it in your notes instead. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and just draw a sketch of that same triangle. So angle P, this was 60 degrees, this was angle H, this was 27 centimeters, 22 centimeters, and then this right here would be side K. So the information they gave us was side angle side. All right, so what are we going to start off solving for first? Yeah, the missing side. Anytime we have a side angle side problem, we're going to start off by solving for the missing side. So we're going to say k squared equals minus cos 60. Okay. So I just need to plug that straight into my calculator. Keeping it classy. Yeah. All right, so this one happened to be a whole number, which is kind of nice. Doesn't always happen like that. All right, did we all get that k squared is 619? Yeah. Okay. So k squared is 619. I'm going to go ahead and raise that to the 0.5 so I can figure out what the square root of that is. So that means that k is approximately 24.879 followed by a 7 is going to round up 879 to 880. Okay, so 880. Okay. All right, so in my triangle, I'm going to erase side k. And I'm going to write 24.9 just so that I can see what I've got going here. And we are solving the triangle, so we are finding all missing sides and all missing angles. Okay? So after we found that, now we're going to go ahead and find an angle. And what do we have to remember when we find angles? What do we have to, which angle can we look for? We have to look for big ones. Doesn't matter. At this case, we might already have the biggest angle. We actually don't. We actually have the middle angle right now. How do we know that the 60 is the middle angle? The side is the middle length. It's not the shortest side, it's not the longest side, it's the middle side. So I already have the middle angle. So which angle do I have to look for next? I have to look for H. So if you look at this now, if we are looking for angle H, that means that this decimal is going to be in our computations. So if 24.880 is in our computation, that means we need to store it. All right? What letter would you guys like to store it as?
C.
No one wants to store it as K? That'd be too logical. Okay, let's store it as A. You guys are weird. All right. So I'm going to store this as A because that's not confusing at all. It's okay. I already stored it. It's good. I'm good. All right. So actually, can we go ahead and do K?
Yeah.
I was like being sassy back, but I'm like, no, I want you guys to be able to look at these notes and have them make sense. Let's go ahead and store it as K. So even if you just stored it as A, you can go ahead and still just hit the store button and store it again as K. So now we just have it stored as 2 letters, and that's fine. It'll work out fine. Okay. Did we all go back and store it as K? Every single one of us? Okay. But we're not even there yet. We're not finding an angle. Okay. All right, so now, which angle do I get to look for first? Angle H. So I'm going to say 27 squared equals 22 squared plus K squared. You see what I did there? So I have a side that's 22 and I have a side that's K. All right, and I'm using my stored number. You see that? Okay. Minus 2 times 22 times K times cos of H. So do we see how that stored number showed up twice? Okay. So what am I going to do first? I'm going to subtract those 2 numbers over. So I'm subtracting over a 22 squared. I'm also subtracting over the number I stored as K squared. So I'm going to type 27 squared minus 22 squared minus K squared. Okay? And now that we do this, since our K number, oh, it actually worked out nice. A lot of times when you do this part, you'll end up getting a nasty decimal right here. We happened to get a nice number, but typically you won't, okay? If you get a nasty decimal right here, you don't have to save it. You don't have to store it. You can just leave it on your screen, okay? But just don't clear anything. All right, so I'm going to say negative 374 equals negative 2 times 22 times K cos of H. Okay. And what do we do next? We divide those 3 numbers over. Negative 2 times 22 times what I stored. Negative 2 times 22 times what I stored. Okay, so my calculator, if I had a nasty decimal, I would have left it there, and I'm just going to hit divide. So that's why you can leave a decimal in there, because you can just hit divide and it will use the decimal for you. Okay? Divide by negative 2 times 22 times K. Oh, not 10. Making sure that I have all of those in the parentheses just like that. Are we good? Okay. So we get that decimal, right? And that decimal equals cos of H. So 0.342 equals cos H. And then how do I solve for H? Okay, so cos inverse of that decimal, and H is 70.023. You guys are like swatting at the fly, but it looks like you're just like dancing. Periodically, like I look over and Courtney's like. All right, so angle H is 70.023 degrees. Okay. So at this point, we have all three sides, and we have two angles. So what do we have to do to find the third angle? Yeah, we're going to do, so I'm going to store this because I'm about to use it to find my third angle. I'll go ahead and store it as H. So on my calculator, I went ahead and I stored that as H. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say 180 minus 60, and then also minus H. And so my last angle is 49.977. And then I just make sure I put all my answers so Miss Rice can grade them easily. Don't do that. That's how like a good kid like sticks it to the man. I'm gonna do this perfectly, but put my answers where it's hard to find them. Punish you, Miss Rice.
You find it.
Yeah. The last one was angle P. Okay. All right, so do we see how we could use a stored number?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. What's that? All right, let's go ahead and flip the page over. Or if you don't need to flip it over, you might not need to. We're going to look in our packets at, we want to do a side. So we're going to do number 10 as our fourth example problem. So we're going to solve the triangle. I wrote trig instead of triangle. And the information here is that side D is 26 meters. Side E is, sorry, that's kilometers. Side E is 20 kilometers. And side F is 22 kilometers. And since we are solving the triangle, we want to find all of the angles that go up with all of those sides. Okay, so I'm going to draw a sketch of that. So I'm just copying number 10 from the packet. And on number 10 in my packet, I'm just going to write down that it's in my notes. I think this one's a little easier than the side angle side one. Yeah.
Why are you writing it differently now? Why are you labeling this different?
I copied the labels from the packet. Yeah. No, if I'm writing it myself, I just do that order that I told you guys about. If I'm copying a diagram, I use their diagram. Yeah.
But they still end up being the same.
It's going to be the same either way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the answers are going to be the same. All right, so we're solving for angles, right, because the sides are already there. So which angle do we have to do first? D. We're going to do D first. All right, so this is the one I'm looking for. So how do I set up that problem? So 26 squared equals and you could do 22 plus 20 and still get it right. Okay. So what do we do now? Subtract the numbers over. And then what do? We're going to divide. Okay, so I have 0.236 is cos D, and then what do? So cos inverse. So angle D is 76.328. Okay, 76.328. So we found that. Now we know that when we get to the very end of the triangle, I'm going to do 180, and I'm going to be subtracting off the two angles I already found. So I need to store this. I need to store this in my calculator for later. Okay? So I'm going to store this as angle D in my calculator. Store D. Okay. Which angle do we solve for next?
No.
We're going to solve for F because that's the next biggest. Okay. Now, some students ask me, Miss Rice, could we finish any of these triangles using law of sines since the formula is a little bit easier to work with? And I would say don't do that because the information that you're using on these problems to do law of sines is the ambiguous case. So if you're doing law of cosines, use law of cosines for the whole problem. If you're doing law of sines, use law of sines for the whole problem. Technically, you can mix and match, and people in more advanced math classes would do that because they would know all the little tricks to keep yourself from making the problem harder. But we, as beginners to this, we should not run that risk. We should just be consistent with what we do. Does that make sense? So if you start with law of cosines, finish with law of cosines. Okay? All right, so the next angle, I'm going to set it up. So I've got 22 squared equals 26 squared plus 20 squared minus 2 times 26 times 20 of cos F, or times cos of F. Has anyone solved for F yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys were like, Miss Rice is the slowpoke today.
Yeah. Nah, I'm pretty much. I'm trying to get home.
Okay, so angle F is 55.303. Can we get that? Okay. So how do we get our last angle? Yeah, we're going to subtract those two from 180. So I'm going to store this as F so that I can use it. And then I'm going to do 180 minus angle D minus angle F.